the infrastructure of women's basketball. We talk about it all the time. There's somebody here, Natalie White, creator of Moolah Kicks, who is here doing the work. Let's talk about it. Locked On Women's Basketball starts now.
Ogunbowale for the win. Good!
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.
Hi there, everybody, and welcome to Locked On Women's Basketball. I'm your host, Howard Megdal. I want to thank you for making us your first listen every day. Have you subscribed? Have you rated and reviewed us? Go ahead and do it. So many of you are showing up like we show up for you. We're here 6 days a week, and you guys are here. There were, it blows my mind, in October, 160,000 of you listening that month alone. So you keep showing up for us too. I really appreciate it. Again, a huge battle that we fight every day to make sure that women's basketball gets the consistency that it deserves in coverage. And I'm not even going to introduce today's guest by my own words. I'm going to use the words of Ari Chambers, the great Ari Chambers. Here's the quote. I know we talk a lot about the product, but the people behind the product are driven, persistent, personable, focused, and deserve all the recognition. Shout out to Moolah Kicks founder Natalie White for this handwritten letter with my new Moolahs. Intention, it matters. Natalie White has created a shoe, a basketball shoe for women and for girls. More specifically, there is a new drop called the Press Break. It came out this fall. It is the first and only performance basketball shoe made specifically for girls. This is the pipeline. This is intention. This is putting the product first. Natalie, thank you for joining us. Take me through what it means to you to be able to have your product on the feet of the women who will be the next generation in women's basketball.
Well, I think, Howard, thanks for having me. We're so excited for all of it. And this season was a huge one, is a huge one for us, where we came out with our kids' press break, as you said. So we have girls playing in shoes that fit their feet earlier. And that's so important to have a long, healthy career. When you're playing and you're introduced to the women's basketball game, and that first introduction is in a shoe that's named after, you know, a men's basketball player who you're not going to be in with a form that makes the bottoms of your feet burn, that makes the tops of your toes hit the top of your shoes, that takes 2 weeks to break in. That's not a great way equipment-wise to start. And what we're so excited by is that when girls say, this is going to be my first season playing girls basketball, whether it be elementary school, middle school, they can have their first season and they can play in a shoe that is fit for them, fit for their game, from a brand whose sole existence is to celebrate them and elevate their game and all of women's basketball. And so we're excited about the kids line that came out, and accompanying it just a few weeks later is our triple double model and our Neovolt low model. And that is specific to bigs and guards. So we have the new triple double model that caters specifically to the game of 4s, 4-5s. And then we have our Neovolt low because we had such demand over a low silhouette that could allow for quicker cuts and really be the shoe for guards.
It really blows my mind. Two parts to it. One, the level of specificity that you are bringing to this work. And number two, just the lack of it coming into this space. And I want to get to where you came in to find the way to bridge that gap. But for our listeners at home, I just want you to have a sense of how important this is. So back in September, Dr. Elizabeth Gardner, who's the Yale University head athletics orthopedic surgeon, talked about the necessity, the importance of a female-specific shoe. Women's basketball players are more likely to tear their ACL compared to their male counterparts. Unfortunately, and we see this every day in our coverage, we see it on a regular basis. You see someone like Brittany Sykes, who had multiple ACL tears before she even got to the WNBA. Women in general have a wider pelvis than men. So that means it puts different stresses downstream onto the legs and the knee as you're balancing while playing basketball. And just when you take in all the biomechanical, all the anatomic factors of the female foot, it is so important to increase stability. It helps with control. It reduces the force. There's just all these different ways in which it's so obvious that this needed to happen. And I know we talked about this in all the different areas as it relates to women's basketball. There are all these things where you just say, how is it not happening yet? But take me through your recognition of that. Where did you first see this? How did you first come to understand where this was?
What's crazy, Howard, is that I also never questioned it. When I was growing up, I played basketball. I played on a ton of AAU teams. I'm from New York. Played on a ton of AAU teams, street leagues, went to Boston College, played club there, managed the team. And it actually wasn't until I was a senior there at Boston College when I realized that I'd been playing in men's and children's sneakers. I'm not very tall, so I never even made it to the men's section. I was just in the kids section. But I saw an ad that had 4 WNBA players, the biggest names that I looked up to, holding out shoes named after NBA players. And that was the first time that it hit me. Oh my gosh. At this point, it wasn't a performance issue that I was thinking about. Right. At this point, I'm just thinking, what is the message that this ad is saying? That you can be the best in the world at women's basketball, but you will still be promoting a product named after someone else. Mm-hmm. And then as I looked into the issue, it became clear what you just said, that not only is there a social implication, but a performance one as well, because the female foot form differs in key places than the male foot form. And so when we play in these shoes, we're also more at risk for knee, ankle, and leg injury. And what that means from a consumer feel every game is what I mentioned in the beginning, where the bottoms of your feet often feel like they're on fire, or they're rubbing they're rubbing against the bottom of the shoe. The tops of your toes hit the top of your shoe. It takes 2 weeks to break them in. All of that, not only does all of that go away when you wear Moolah Kicks and basketball shoes that are fit for your foot form, but the brand itself is changing that messaging that was kind of that undercurrent, right, in the ad that says, you could be the best, but you're still going to be promoting something else. Moolah is an opportunity for us to come together as a women's basketball community and say, every dollar that this brand earns goes back into women's basketball, goes back into better products, goes back into more sponsorships. And it's not because we feel good about it. It's not because it's charity. It's not because no one's done it before. It's because we love women's basketball and know all of the qualities that make it so exciting and so special. And we want to honor and serve all of the players in this community.
It is interesting to me that, again, it comes back to, and I know I keep drawing parallels to the larger women's basketball space, but I think it's so clear, right? Everyone's focused so much on outcomes, and we talk about outcomes as it relates to women's sports, and we miss out the input. And the input here of literally the shoe being a barrier to success is something. I mean, you talked about you didn't think about it, but of course, because how do you see what is not talked about and is not seen? So it does not surprise me. It is incredible. And then again, to be able to do something about it is so significant. In segment 2, I'm excited to talk to you about some of the other ways in which you've publicized this. We want to talk about, obviously, some of the high-profile players who have been part of this movement as well. But first, Locked on Women's Basketball is brought to you by Ibotta. how does free Thanksgiving sound? Because this year, Ibotta is here to give you cash back and help make sure your Thanksgiving table is complete. Who wants turkey without the gravy? Starting November 1st, for the fourth year in a row, Ibotta, and by gravy I mean money, is giving 100% cash back on your Thanksgiving feast. Just add the offers in the app to redeem for everything you need to make your Thanksgiving feast complete. All you have to do is shop at your favorite retailers and upload your receipt. So how do you do it? Download the Ibotta app now and use the code LOCKED, that's LOCKED, to get 100% cash back on your Thanksgiving dinner starting November 1st. Again, go to the App Store or the Google Play Store and download the free IBOTTA app. Use the code LOCKED. That's the Ibotta app in the Google Play or App Store using the code LOCKED. So segment two, back here with Natalie White, the visionary behind Moolah Kicks. And, it doesn't surprise me anymore what I see. This has happened so fast. This has been since 2020. And you've done this. You created a company into the teeth of a global pandemic, and it is still succeeding because it matters so much and because it's so important. But a Courtney Williams brand shoe shows up. And we've had Courtney here on the show, and I've covered Courtney, been privileged to since her college days as well. It seems to me if you're going for authenticity when it comes to a women's basketball shoe, Courtney Williams is almost like the prototype for who you'd seek out. Take me through how that partnership came together and why you thought she was such an important person to be wearing and using a signature shoe.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we love Courtney. She's couldn't ask for a better athlete. But I think what is special about authenticity is that it's something you can't buy. Right. And it's something that you also can't fake. And I'd say that the authenticity of the brand is in our DNA, that we're buying for female ballers, right? It's everyone who's contributed to this brand getting to where it is today. Mm-hmm. And that means all of the street players that wore our first prototypes and helped us do product testing. That means the Boston College team who shared right at the turn of NIL, who helped me get the word out and share the Moolah Kicks message with everyone. That's Courtney Williams hopping on board and being our first WNBA player and being excited to do it. That's coaches getting shoes for their entire teams. It's everyone in the women's basketball community that believes in the brand and the vision that we have for women's basketball and the vision and opportunity that this brand is creating, backed up by a top tier performance product that is elevating their game on an individual level. And no one can put that on display better than Courtney Williams, who had an outstanding season for the Chicago Sky.
Mm-hmm. There's no question about it. It obviously is one of a bunch of partnerships that you've put together, whether it's Courtney, whether it's working with the Connecticut Sun, even just the fact that, Dick's Sporting Goods is the place that you can get these options for kids as well. And so I'm just curious because it's over this 3-year period where we've seen, I almost feel like a dawning realization within the sports business world writ large that women's sports is not just an opportunity to do the right thing. It's an opportunity to make a great deal of money while you do it, which is often the key to seeing this type of change. Have those conversations gotten easier? Have they changed? Is the tenor of the conversation different? Or is there still a large barrier to entry for people to understand, no, this matters, this is important, but also this is an opportunity?
Can you hear me okay, Howard?
Oh, I hear you fine. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Sorry, you cut out for a little bit. Would you mind just re-saying
Not at all. So basically, I wanted to know whether over this 3-year period, we have seen the tenor of those conversations change, whether you think that there are more and more people in the sports business world who fully understand that this is not just the right thing to do. This is not just the moral thing to do, but this is a real business opportunity, a real gap in the audience that can be filled and can be, an extremely effective way to grow their brands as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I think for us, what's great about it, Howard, is that for so long we as women's basketball players have been kind of shouting, saying, we know what we have, someone pay attention. And with the Moolah Kicks brand, the response was, okay, if no one's going to pay attention, we'll make it for ourselves, right, and we will be the ones to benefit. And I think that's the beauty of this brand, right, is that when we get stronger, women's basketball gets stronger. And when women's basketball gets stronger, so does the Moolah Kicks brand. And it's this symbiotic relationship where we are really growing hand in hand, fueling the women's basketball community, and they're fueling us in turn. So as for the brands that have now taken interest, I think it's fantastic for the sport, and we're really glad that we can be part of that showing of what this sport is. And I think once you put that on display, of course people are going to love it, people are going to care, and people are going to be diehard fans. There's no question about it.
I want to address that authenticity. I want to drill deeper a little bit into it. And I want to read a quote you gave to the journalist Lindsay D'Arcangelo back in 2021. Because
I love that.
It caught my attention then, and I was thinking about it more as I was getting ready for our show today. This is a really great moment. This is 2021. You're saying this. This is a really great moment in women's basketball, but we want to make sure that somebody else doesn't take advantage of it for the wrong reasons. We don't want Nike making a sneaker because there were inequalities in an NCAA women's weight room and then not making another one for 10 years. And I feel like we've seen that so many times, right, in the women's sports space, where somebody gives out breadcrumbs and then they want, a standing ovation for it. When you're having those conversations, how do you figure out, how do you determine who's in it for the right reasons? What's that process like for you, just as a businesswoman?
Well, Howard, we don't, quite frankly. Like, for the Moolah brand, we are solely focused on, that's the beauty of this brand, is that we're focused on serving the women's basketball consumer. And for us, when and why other brands decide to come in or not is completely up to them. But we know that we have a commitment to this sport, this group, these players, these coaches, and this game. And that's absolutely unwavering. And so if you go back to authenticity, that's our difference. But we aren't able to say, we only always have control over ourselves. And I think that's true if you're a leader, a player, a coach. As a player, you can choose, am I going to buy from a brand that is here this season but has never been here before, and I'm not sure what they're coming out with, or am I going to buy from the brand that has the women's basketball community has put their blood, sweat, and tears into testing and making this product and growing this business? Am I going to be a part of a 1-year stint, or am I going to be part of a movement? And I think that is really at the core of what we do. As for sponsors and other people who you say, sometimes give a crumb, I think I would say two things. One is, while I see it, and I'd also say that women's basketball, we know we have a really special product, a special thing going. And I think that sometimes it can feel scary, like you don't know necessarily if they're going to be in it for the long run.
Right.
But on the other hand, I think that we all have an obligation to say, if they're going to be in it this season, say we get a sponsor I'm a high school team, we get a sponsor to sponsor us this season. Well, let's make it the best season. Let's earn that next season, because these long-term commitments from, I don't know, let's say it's a random sponsor, they're earned. You have to take care of this, you have to take care of it. You have to cherish that relationship, and you have to earn your place every single season. And I think that's a really good perspective to have, that all of us have an opportunity to build women's basketball together. The more that we stop seeing it as something that just happens, and we see, okay, well, what can I put in to make sure that we continue to secure this? And sure, maybe they started as a 1-season thing, but once they have 1 season, we know we can turn that into a 10, 20-year deal.
It's putting more in than you take out. It's
Absolutely.
It's I love that. I love the way you think about that. I know it's the way Ari handles things. And so I thought it just, when I saw that come together, I was just like, right, that makes sense, right? Ari, Moolah, you name it. It's just there's a giving, there's a long-term effort to it that I think is beautiful. I want to finish up with you in our final segment about the goal, your vision, where you see things. But so back here with Natalie White, and just it's so interesting to me that what you've been building has felt less like, hey, we're going to try this, we're going to try that, and much more like foundation. And I think that's obvious in the way in which the company has grown and the way in which you're doing things. It's how you build infrastructure. So I'm so curious, because I know you must always be thinking about, what does 3 years, what does 5 years look like? Where should it be? You and I are having a great conversation. It's 2030. Where is Moolah Kicks?
Well, hopefully, for starters, Moolah's on the feet of every female hooper in the world.
Yeah.
Right. So everyone's rocking with Moolah Kicks. And I think women's basketball, think about where it was in 2020 and where it is in 2023. We're going to continue to see women's hoops to skyrocket. And I'm so excited. You know, I don't think I have a vision for what I'd like it to look like. But I think it's just going to be a whole world different than where women's basketball sits today. And I think that Moolah is hopefully going to be on the feet, on the bodies of all of the players, all of the fans in the game. I mean, we're going to continue to grow and elevate this sport and plug in however the market needs it. And we couldn't be more excited.
Just going to say to my listeners, as a point of personal privilege, you can tell, Natalie talked about it, you can tell who's here for now, and you can tell the people who were here yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Support the brands that are doing that. Natalie White, Moolah Kicks, I appreciate your time very much. Locked On Women's Basketball is brought to you by FanDuel. And FanDuel has an NFL offer. It doesn't really apply to the team I root for, the New York Giants, but there are other teams. And so you might want to go with them, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If your team has Tommy DeVito at quarterback, not so much. But if your team wins, and there are teams playing the Giants every week now, you get $150 free from FanDuel with a $5 bet. The app is so easy to use for anything, of course. It spreads, player props, over-unders, doesn't matter. FanDuel's got it all. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. Again, that's FanDuel.com/LOCKEDON. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. And speaking of people who are doing the work, I am really excited to have Jenn Bishop joining us for the program. Jenn is an author, most specifically and most recently, a book about it's hard to summarize. It's about girls basketball. It's about a lot of different things. The book, of course. So you know what? We're going to start over. Okay, good. You got it. All right, hold on. And speaking of people doing the work, I am delighted to be joined by the author Jenn Bishop, who is nice enough to hold up the book. It's called Free Throws, Friendship, and Other Things We Fouled Up. Here to talk about girls basketball, women's basketball, telling these stories. She is, of course, an accomplished author who has you've written 14 now, right?
No, this is my fifth book.
Fifth book. Oh, so sorry. So
I've written 14 someday.
We'll get there. We'll get to 14. But the fifth book called Free Throws, Friendship, and Other Things We Fouled Up. Very important to check this out. And Jenn, thank you for joining us. Take me through, you're a basketball fan, a lifer as far as that goes in Cincinnati, but why telling a story of girls and women's basketball now?
Yeah. Oh, thank you. So thank you so much for having me. That's a good question. Like, why women's basketball now? So I grew up, I was a child of the 90s. I played basketball, honestly, for 1 year in 6th grade. I was not allowed to play with my glasses, which I needed, and I was terrible at it. And I look back and I wish I had more, stories about women's sports, more experiences. I'm so happy to see that, I'm just so excited that last year was like the highest viewing audience ever for the Women's March Madness, Women's Final Four. For me, it's so important to tell these stories so that girls see themselves everywhere. Girls should be, as equal to men in every sport, not just tennis. Like it would be great to see more, equality and equity in the sport. And I think that part of it is getting kids really encouraged about sports early and being able to see themselves as a player, but also as a fan. Because obviously I come into this again with my 6th grade 1-year experience. I come in more from the perspective of a super fan of the sport.
But of course, though, accessing it in those ways matter too. By the way, the 14 I came from was 14 Hollow Road.
Yes.
To home, things you can't say, where we used to roam, all part of the Jenn Bishop canon. And so again, like accessing it, to me, it goes back to at Cincinnati, where there's a men's team and a women's team. For a while during the renovations at the arena, the men's team played at another large-scale arena. The women played at a high school gym. And so there has always been this gap between accessing one and the other. But in Cincinnati, where it is such a basketball crazy town, I don't feel like people necessarily know that. Take me through just like how much that is part of the day-to-day life there.
Yeah, it is a huge part of Cincinnati. So I moved to Cincinnati in 2016. Really, the only thing I knew about Cincinnati was that they had a really good men's basketball team. Growing up, I got to fill out the brackets for my dad, and I won his March Madness pool at work when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. And then I just kept paying attention to March Madness over the years. And so, yeah, that was really the only thing I knew. And I came here and I completely underestimated how intense it is. People really rep their college sports teams here in a way that when I lived in Boston and Chicago, they did not. I mean, on game days, everybody's wearing their apparel. You see everybody in their Xavier or Cincinnati stuff, and there is a lot of trash talk. Rivalry is felt deeply by the players, and it's exciting that we have a newer coach now, Wes Miller, who's really, really embraced the rivalry, whereas I think some previous coaches tried to downplay it a little. Mm-hmm. But for me, and I think for a lot of fans, it's so fun to get into that whole rivalry experience. I would say the crosstown shootout games are always the highlight of the season for me. They're just so high energy and rabid, and you just feel how much everybody wants it. These two schools are just 3 miles apart. So I don't think in any other sporting rivalry that they're just so physically close to each other.
It feels to me a lot like you hear people talk about Dodgers-Giants rivalries in Major League Baseball when both were in New York, or Arsenal-Tottenham if you follow English Premier League now. But it's a great thing to see, and I love that it endures. I want to talk about the book, though, as well. And, just don't take it from me. Take it from Kirkus Reviews. Rich in tight bonds as well as savvy coaching on both gameplay and forgiveness, which I think is an interesting play on words with it. You have them on other characters, and there's a lot that's interesting in there, but a basketball playing nun, what was the inspiration for that?
So I think anybody who watched March Madness in 2018, which is when I started getting the idea for this book, might have an idea where that nun came from. It's none other than Sister Jean, who, I mean, obviously, as we all, the world fell in love with Sister Jean that season, I don't think we had any idea that she actually had a bit of a basketball past. I recently read her memoir or autobiography, and she talks about helping out coaching with some of the students earlier in her days as a teacher. So it was really fascinating for me to see that she's a little more like Sister Louisa than I thought. But yeah, Sister Louisa and Louisa Jean in this book is one of my favorite characters. And so she's a probably in her late 70s nun on the west side of Cincinnati who becomes a mentor figure to one of the protagonists, Abby. But then in the past, you get to see that she was the coach for both of their dads in the 1990s. So yeah, she was super fun to write.
When you started writing these books, when you started writing children's books, I'm wondering what it was, whether writing about women's sports was on your radar, and sort of how specific to this moment you arrived at doing that now? You talked about, obviously, the audience was enormous last year, almost 10 million people watching LSU Iowa in the final. Certainly, as somebody who, is steeped in it every day, it feels as if there is a movement all over. But I'm wondering sort of how you access that specific part of it. Like you, I grew up in the 90s, and so I had a significant period of time where there wasn't even a WNBA as I'm growing up.
Right. No, and I think part of it is like, sort of like subconscious, like where do all these pieces come from? And so I think one place that they probably came from is I grew up in New England, and, UConn women's basketball was right down, like 20 minutes away from where I grew up. And so even though my grandmother, in her 80s and 90s, while I knew her, had no opportunity to play women's sports, she loved watching UConn women's basketball. You would visit her, in the nursing home, and she would have that on. And I also went to a high school that had a terrific field hockey team. I did not make that field hockey team, but it was really cool for me to see, women succeeding in sports, and that being like the big thing for my school. I went to an all girls school. Mm-hmm. So to really see being sporty was celebrated. It was not, that was the way to be, cool and important and everything at my school. So I think, it's something to aspire to, for sure.
In the midst of, since you've written this book, have you heard from people who feel like they're seen in a different way, being able to read it as, girls and women in basketball are still looking for more and more representation? Just what has the feedback been like?
Yeah, so I think the book has only been out for this is 3 weeks. So I have not heard much from actual children. Along the way, I've heard more from gatekeepers, like educators and librarians, and they're encouraged because what they see in their classrooms is that most of their kids are really into sports. I think what you actually see is that at the higher level at publishing, sometimes they're like, oh, well, I actually had one editor who was like, I don't know about this book. This book has multiple storylines. It has multiple time periods. I don't know if a sporty kid would be able to understand that. I'm like, what? Sporty. So many kids are sporty, and sporty kids are really smart. So I really took issue with that and was very happy to find a home for this book that really understood and appreciated what sporty kids today are like, and that these are kids with diverse interests, kids that succeed in academics too.
They do it all.
Yeah. I used to be a teen librarian, so I know what kids today are like, and it's pretty far from the stereotypes that you might have kind of grown up with in the 90s.
No question about it. Well, the book is Free Throws, Friendship, and Other Things We Fouled Up. As I understand it, there are some holidays coming. If you guys are interested in trying to find the perfect gift for the sporty kid in your life. Jenn Bishop, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us.
Thanks so much again for having me. And go Bearcats!